In the snow-locked Villa Edelweiss, a blizzard traps 8 strangers with a millionaire host. At 11:27 p.m., a blood-curdling scream shatters the night. Adrian Kettering is found stabbed through the heart. In a study locked from inside, key still turned. No footprints in the snow. Impossible! Debts, blackmail, forbidden love. Everyone has a motive. But only one woman sees through the lies, Miss Marple. As false clues frame the innocent and lover's plot in shadows, she unravels the deadliest trick. A perfect murder by 2 killers. Will she expose them before the storm buries the truth forever? Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The village of Gore-le-Châtel lay cradled in a high valley of the Swiss Alps, where the peaks stood sentinel like white-capped giants against the December sky. It was a place of chalets with carved balconies and sloping roofs heavy with snow, where the air bit crisp and clean, and the silence was broken only by the occasional chime of cowbells from the lower pastures, or in winter by the muffled crunch of skis on fresh powder. To the casual visitor, it might have seemed a postcard of peace, but Miss Jane Marple, who had seen her share of human deceptions in quieter English hamlets, knew better than to trust appearances. She had arrived 3 days earlier, conveyed by sledge from the little funicular station at Interlaken, at the invitation of Mrs. Eleanor Harbottle, widow of Miss Marple's nephew Raymond, and a lady of comfortable means who had taken to wintering abroad since the war. "The air does wonders for one's chest, Aunt Jane," Eleanor had written, "and the Villa Edelweiss is simply divine, quite the jewel of Gore-le-Châtel." Miss Marple, bundled in her woolen coat and carrying a small valise, had found it so. A sturdy 3-story house of dark timber and stone, with wide eaves and a drawing-room dominated by a vast fireplace of carved granite. It was now the eve of St. Nicholas's Day, and Mr. Adrian Kettering, the villa's owner and host, had assembled his annual party of English guests, expatriates mostly, fleeing the fogs of London for this alpine retreat. Miss Marple sat in a low armchair by the fire, her knitting on her lap. A soft grey shawl for a distant cousin, the needles moving with the steady rhythm of long habit. She was 84, slight and bird-like, with soft white hair neatly waved under a lace cap, and eyes of mild blue that missed nothing. The others called her Miss Marple, with a deference born of Eleanor's tales, though she discouraged familiarity. The company numbered 8, besides the servants. Mr. Kettering himself was a man of 50, stout and ruddy-cheeked, with the booming voice of a man who had made his pile in city stocks, and saw no reason to apologize for it. He moved among his guests with a glass of mulled wine in hand, his checkered waistcoat straining at the buttons. "Another storm brewing, ladies and gentlemen," he announced, peering through the leaded windows at the darkening sky. "The passes will be blocked by morning. Capital! A proper Yuletide siege. What?" Beside him fluttered Mrs. Harold Vance, a plump woman in a velvet gown too youthful for her 45 years, her rings flashing as she rearranged a tray of Lebkuchen. Her husband, Major Vance, retired from the Indian Army, lounged on a sofa opposite Miss Marple, nursing a pipe. He was a big man, with a clipped moustache and a sunburned face that spoke of polo fields and messes. His laughter was hearty, but his eyes held a restless gleam. Across the room stood Mrs. Lydia Fortescue, elegant in black crepe, a widow of some 38 summers whose husband had left her comfortably off, or so it was said. She sipped her wine with the poise of one accustomed to admiration. her dark hair coiled low, a single emerald brooch at her throat. Her brother, Mr. Rupert Fortescue, hovered nearby, a thin, irritable man of 50, with a pinched nose and a habit of tugging at his tie. He was a dealer in art, or claimed to be, and his conversation ran chiefly to complaints about the Swiss customs duties. Young Dr. Peter Langton completed the circle, a local physician of perhaps 30, with fair hair and a quick, uncertain smile. He had trained in Edinburgh, guests whispered, but settled here after some vague disappointment in England. He stood by the piano, turning the pages for Miss Clara Beach, a spinster of indeterminate age, who played carols with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Miss Beach was small and bird-like herself, in a gown of faded lavender, her sharp eyes darting about as her fingers stumbled over Silent Night. She lived on a modest annuity, it was rumoured, and collected village scandals as others collected stamps. Miss Marple observed them all, her needles clicking softly. Human nature, she reflected, was much the same in these mountains as in any English drawing-room. There was the bluff host masking some private anxiety, the military man with debts unspoken, the poised widow whose glance lingered too long on the young doctor, the irritable brother forever glancing at his watch. Even Miss Beach's gossip, delivered in shrill asides about that dreadful woman in the next chalet, held the familiar tang of envy. As the clock struck 7, Kettering clapped his hands. "Dinner in 10 minutes, my dears, and after, a toast to keep the wolves at bay." He raised his glass high, the ruby liquid catching the firelight. "To a cosy Yuletide in Gaulle-Châtel, may the storms seal us in and keep the world out." Glasses chimed, laughter rose. Mrs. Vance's high and tinkling, Major Vance's a bark, Lydia Fortescue's low and musical. Dr. Langton joined in, but Miss Marple noted how his smile did not reach his eyes, and how Rupert Fortescue drank too deeply, his hand unsteady. Outside, the first snowflakes began to whirl, soft as swan's down, against the gathering dusk. "A merry party," murmured Eleanor Harbottle, settling beside Miss Marple with a plate of pastries. "Adrian, does it so well?" Miss Marple nodded, her gaze on the window. "Very merry, my dear, though storms have a way of stirring things up, even indoors." The wind chose that moment to gust, rattling the panes like impatient fingers. Miss Beach struck a false note on the piano, and for an instant the room held its breath. Then Kettering's laugh boomed again, and the moment passed. But Miss Marple, resuming her knitting, felt the first faint prickle of unease, as if, beneath the cheer, something coiled and waited in the snow. Chapter 2. The Midnight Cry. The dinner had been a triumph of Swiss abundance. Fondue bubbling in its cacolon, venison roasted with juniper berries, and a strudel so flaky it dissolved on the tongue. Mr. Adrian Kettering had presided at the head of the long oak table, with his usual bonhomie, pouring generous measures of Bernese white wine, and regaling the company with anecdotes of his latest triumphs on the London Exchange. "The market's a beast, my dears," he had boomed, "but I ride it like a polo pony." Laughter had followed, though Miss Marple, seated between Eleanor Harbottle and Miss Clara Beach, detected a hollow note in it, much like the forced merriment at the vicarage fete, before old Mrs. Price's scandal broke. By 10 o'clock, the party had migrated back to the drawing-room, where the fire crackled defiantly against the rising wind. Snow had begun in earnest, fat flakes clotting the windows like curds. Major Vance proposed bezique, but enthusiasm waned. Mrs. Vance yawned behind her fan, and Dr. Langton excused himself early, citing a patient in the village. Lydia Fortescue lingered by the hearth, her silhouette graceful against the flames, while her brother Rupert slumped in an armchair, nursing a final cognac and muttering about the chill in his bones. Miss Marple retired at 10:30, her room on the second floor overlooking the rear gardens, now a swirling white chaos. The Villa Edelweiss was a warren of corridors, polished parquet floors, walls papered in faded alpine scenes, and doors of heavy oak that latched with a satisfying click. She changed into her flannel nightgown, wound her silver hair in a net, and settled into the four-poster with a copy of The Life of Our Lord by the Reverend Farrar. The storm howled beyond the double-glazed panes, and she read peacefully for perhaps an hour, her mind pleasantly occupied with thoughts of human virtue amid temptation. It was 11:27 when the scream shattered the night. It came from above, high and keening like a soul in torment, followed by a crash, as of furniture overturning. Miss Marple laid her book aside with deliberate calm, lit her bedside candle, and slipped a woolen shawl over her shoulders. She paused only to retrieve her spectacles from the nightstand before stepping into the corridor. The house erupted into pandemonium. Doors flew open along the hall. First Mrs. Vance, barefoot and clutching her wrapper, her face a mask of terror. Then Eleanor Harbottle, pale but composed, a lamp in hand. Miss Beach, huddled in a dressing gown 2 sizes too large, whimpering, "What was that? Oh, merciful heavens!" Footsteps thundered from the stairs. Major Vance, in trousers and undershirt, bellowing, "Everyone stay put!" And behind him, Rupert Fortescue, dishevelled and wild-eyed, demanding, "Who screamed? Who's hurt?" The cry had emanated from the 3rd floor, where the family bedrooms lay, but it drew them all towards the study on the 2nd floor landing, a room Kettering used as his private sanctum after dinner. Mrs. Vance, sobbing incoherently, pointed toward it. "Adrian! Adrian's room! Blood! So much blood!" Miss Marple, moving with the quiet efficiency of one who had faced worse alarms in Danemid cottages, reached the study door first. It stood slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. She pushed it wide. Adrian Kettering lay on his back amid the Persian rug, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. He wore his dinner jacket still, as if he had come here for a late-night cigar or accounts. The cause of death was hideously apparent. The heavy brass poker from the fireplace protruded from his chest, driven in with such force that the fender had been dented where it fell. Blood pooled dark and viscous beneath him, soaking into the rug and staining the hearth tiles. His eyes stared sightless at the coffered ceiling, mouth agape in a final, silent protest. The air smelled of blood and extinguished embers. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mrs. Vance collapsed against her husband with a wail. "He's dead! Murdered! Oh, God, murdered!" Major Vance thrust forward, kneeling beside the body. "By Jove! Straight through the heart! The devil who did this is still in the house." He rose, face grim, and scanned the room. The study was small and secure. Bookshelves lined 3 walls, a partner's desk dominated the centre, and a single window overlooked the snow-choked terrace. That window was fastened tight, its latch bolted, with no sign of forcing. The door, the very one they had just entered, possessed a sturdy Yale lock, and Miss Marple noted immediately that the key remained in it, turned to the locked position from inside. Papers lay scattered on the desk, an ashtray overturned, but nothing suggested a struggle. The poker alone had spoken. Rupert Fortescue pushed past, his face ashen. "Adrian! Good God, who—" He checked the window, rattling it futilely. "Sealed shut, and the door locked. Impossible!" Lydia Fortescue arrived last, descending the stairs in a silk kimono, her composure cracking only slightly as she took in the scene. "Adrian!" she whispered, one hand to her mouth. Dr. Langton appeared moments later, summoned by the commotion, his medical bag in hand. He confirmed what was plain: death instantaneous, no more than half an hour prior. By midnight, the household was assembled in the drawing-room, blankets draped over shoulders, coffee served by the trembling maids. Kettering's valet, a Swiss named Henri with a wooden expression, had fetched the telephone from the study. Mercifully, the line held against the storm, and summoned help. Outside, the blizzard raged unabated, visibility nil beyond the veranda. Dawn crept in at 8, grey and reluctant, when the growl of engines announced the arrival of Inspector Henri Duval. He came by snowcat from Zurich, a stocky man of 40, with a close-cropped beard and eyes like chipped flint beneath his fur-trimmed cap. 2 constables accompanied him, their boots shedding snow as they stamped into the hall. Duval shed his greatcoat, revealing a tweed suit of English cut. He had studied at Oxford, it transpired, and took charge with quiet authority. "Messieurs, dames," he said in precise English, "I am Inspector Duval of the cantonal police. No one leaves this house until I say. The storm has closed the passes. We are, as Monsieur Kettering might have said, prisoners together." He examined the body in situ, photographing it with a bulky Leica, measuring the wound, testing the poker for prints. It yielded only smudges. The locked door puzzled him most. The key was inside, turned. Window, impossible. No secret passages. The villa was built solid in 1890. He dusted the desk, the fender, the latch, nothing conclusive. In the drawing-room, he questioned them briefly. Mrs. Vance had screamed upon finding the door ajar and peeking in. She had retired at 11, she swore. Major Vance had been in bed, reading Field Marshal Montgomery's memoirs. Lydia Fortescue claimed a headache powder at 11:15. Rupert, a sleepless turn about his room. Dr. Langton had returned from his call at 10:40, straight to bed. Miss Beach had dozed by the fire until 11:30. Eleanor Harbottle vouched for the servants, all accounted for below stairs. Miss Marple sat quietly by the window. Her knitting resumed as if to anchor the chaos. Duval approached her last. "And you, madame, you heard nothing?" "Only the scream, Inspector," she replied mildly. "And the wind, of course. It covers so much." He nodded, glancing at the whirling snow. "A locked room enigma, straight from your English novels. But this is real blood, not ink." He straightened, addressing the room. "Murder, most foul, and the murderer is among us." The words hung heavy as the fire sputtered. Outside, the storm showed no mercy, burying Gore-le-Châtel deeper in its white shroud. Miss Marple's needles clicked on, but her mind turned inward. In Danmead, a locked dairy had hidden more than milk cans once. Here, too, the key, literal or no, would turn. Chapter 3. The suspects emerge. The drawing-room of the Villa Edelweiss, so cosy the evening before, now resembled a stage set for tragedy. Heavy velvet curtains were drawn against the unrelenting blizzard, and the fire, fed with pine logs by the silent Henri, cast flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled company. Inspector Duval had commandeered the Longchamp trestle table as his headquarters. A typewriter clacked under the fingers of his younger constable, while the elder sketched diagrams of the study layout. The air was thick with the scent of strong coffee and unspoken fear. Plates of bread and cheese stood untouched. Duval, his beard glistening with melted snow, paced before the fireplace as the clock struck 10. "We begin," he announced in his clipped English. "Monsieur Kettering is dead, stabbed at close quarters, no more than 30 minutes before the scream at 11:27. The locked door, the sealed window, someone among us is a liar or a genius, or both. I shall hear from each of you in turn." He started with the host's papers, retrieved from the study safe by his own hand. Adrian Kettering was a rich man, Duval said, tapping a sheaf of documents. Stocks in Vickers, property in Mayfair, and, most intriguingly, a numbered account here in Zurich. Over £200,000, deposited irregularly since 1942. Wartime profits, perhaps? Black market? He was generous to friends, but exacting. Many owed him. The room stirred. Major Vance shifted in his armchair, his pipe unlit. Mrs. Vance twisted a handkerchief into knots. Miss Marple, seated by the window with her knitting, noted how Lydia Fortescue's fingers tightened on her coffee cup. "Major Vance," Duval began, "you argued with the deceased last Tuesday over an investment. Witnesses heard raised voices from the billiard room." The Major's face reddened, but his tone was soldierly. "Fact is, Inspector, Kettering persuaded me into some South African mining shares 2 years back. Promised 10%. Instead, they collapsed. Cost me £5,000. I taxed him with it, yes. Called him a damned swindler. But murder? I'd not soil my hands for a bad tip." He glanced at his wife, who nodded vigorously. "We'd have been homeless without Adrian's hospitality this winter." Duval made a note. "And the cufflink found near the body. Yours, Major. Initialed HV." "Impossible. My links are gold, in my dressing case. Checked this morning." "Noted." Duval turned to the Vance's fluttery spouse. "Mrs. Vance, you discovered the body. Why were you on the landing at 11:30? I couldn't sleep," she stammered. "The storm. I went for a glass of water. The study door was ajar, just a crack, and I peeked in, saw him, screamed." Tears welled. Adrian was kindness itself to us. Next, Lydia Fortescue. She met Duval's gaze steadily, her emerald brooch catching the light. "My relationship with Adrian was cordial. He was my late husband's closest friend, and mine in business matters." "But your brother," Duval pressed. "Rupert Fortescue owes him £20,000 from a gallery venture that failed. Kettering demanded repayment last month." Rupert, slouched by the piano, jerked upright. "Lies! A temporary loan. Adrian and I were partners." His voice cracked. Sweat beaded his forehead despite the chill. Lydia's poise faltered. "Rupert is impulsive, but Adrian was family. He named me in his will. Half the estate, I believe." Duval's eyes sharpened. "Beneficiary? Interesting. And you, madame? Seen leaving the study at 11, according to Miss Beach?" Miss Beach, perched on a poof like a vigilant sparrow, piped up. "I was dozing here by the fire. Heard footsteps, soft, feminine. Looked up. Lydia, in her kimono, slipping from the landing." Lydia's laugh was brittle. "Preposterous. I took a powder for my migraine. My room is next to the study. Perhaps you mistook another." Duval nodded to his constable, who produced a small vial from an evidence bag. "Seconal tablets, found in the study wastebasket. Yours, madame?" Silence then. I dropped it. Clumsy of me. Miss Marple's needles paused. Dropped indeed, like the aspirin in old Mrs. Templeton's room, years ago in Danemead, when the truth was a forged prescription. Dr. Peter Langton was next, summoned from his makeshift sick bay in the morning room. He entered with his black bag, fair hair tousled, but his hands steady. I can add little, Inspector. Returned from old Frau Myers at 10:45, bed by 11, and your history with Kettering. Duval slid a letter across the table, yellowed, dated 6 months prior. You write demanding money or exposure. Langton's face drained of colour. A private matter. He knew of my engagement to his niece, Emily. It ended badly. Her letter stopped. Adrian blamed me, cut off my allowance. I asked for a loan to start practice here. He refused. Or, Duval suggested, to hush his knowledge of your indiscretions. The Zurich clinics whisper of a doctor supplying morphine to tourists. Libel, Langton snapped, then softened. I treat pain legally. Adrian threatened to ruin me out of spite. Miss Beach tittered nervously. Spite? Or because you were seen with Lydia, Doctor? Moonlight walks in the village square. Lydia shot her a venomous look. Langton said nothing. Eleanor Harbottle spoke briefly. She had retired early, heard nothing. The servants, Henri, the cook Martha, and 2 maids were vouched for. They slept in the attic, roused only by the scream. Duval summed up, standing tall. Motives everywhere. Debt for Vance and Fortescue, inheritance for the widow, blackmail for the doctor. Alibis? Thin as alpine mist. No one saw anyone, except Miss Beach's ghost, on the landing. The room buzzed. Major Vance growled. What about outsiders? A burglar? Impossible, Duval replied. Snow on the terrace, undisturbed. Door locked from inside. The killer knew the house. Miss Marple cleared her throat softly. All eyes turned. Duval, ever polite, inclined his head. Madame Marple, you have observed? Only that human nature is much the same everywhere, Inspector, she said mildly. Even in the snows of Gorse-le-Châtel. Debts fester like untreated wounds. Old loves curdle into hate. I recall a locked greenhouse in my village once. Similar whispers, similar denials. But the truth peeked through the glass. Duval smiled faintly. You English and your villages. Like Monsieur Poirot's little grey cells? Very like, she murmured, resuming her knitting, though mine are pinker from all the wool. A ripple of uneasy laughter broke the tension. Rupert Fortescue drained his glass, muttering, Old women's fancies. But Lydia Fortescue watched Miss Marple with narrowed eyes, and Dr. Langton's fingers drummed the armrest. Outside, the storm abated slightly, a brief lull revealing the white peaks. But inside, suspicions coiled tighter. Duval dismissed them to their rooms, under guard, promising further questions after lunch. As they dispersed, Miss Marple lingered by the fire, her gaze on the scattered papers. Eleanor approached. Aunt Jane, dreadful, isn't it? Very dreadful, my dear. Miss Marple folded her shawl. But puzzles sort themselves, given time, like unravelling a dropped stitch. In the corridor above, footsteps hurried, soft, urgent. Miss Marple glanced up, seeing only shadows. But she noted the direction, towards the study. Human nature, indeed, already tugging at loose threads. Chapter 4. Whispers in the snow. The blizzard, having vented its first fury, settled into a relentless siege. For 3 days, the Villa Edelweiss stood isolated, a ship adrift in a sea of white. The snow-ploughs from Zurich could not reach Gorse-le-Châtel. Telephone lines crackled with static. and the wireless brought only garbled bulletins of avalanches blocking the passes. Inspector Duval's men patrolled the perimeter, their skis leaving futile tracks that the wind erased within minutes. Inside, the atmosphere thickened like overboiled soup. Civility frayed at the edges, replaced by sidelong glances and barbed pleasantries. Meals were taken in the drawing room, served by the maids with downcast eyes. Conversation skirted the murder, veering to safer topics, the excellence of Martha's Rusty, the latest London plays. But undercurrents ran deep. Major Vance took to pacing the billiard room, cue in hand muttering about incompetent foreigners. His wife clung to him like ivy, her laughter now a brittle chime. Rupert Fortescue drank steadily, his complaints about the wine giving way to sullen silence. Once, Miss Marple overheard him hiss to Lydia, "If that fool Duval doesn't clear this up, we're all finished." Lydia Fortescue maintained her elegance, but cracks showed. A tremor in her hand as she lit a cigarette, a sharpness when Miss Beach prattled about the old days. Dr. Langton volunteered his services freely, bandaging a cut on Henry's thumb, dosing Mrs. Vance for nerves, but his restlessness betrayed him. He haunted the corridors at odd hours, claiming insomnia. Duval worked methodically, his constables combing the attics and cellars. On the second day, they unearthed a curious item from the housekeeper's old quarters, a wax impression of the study key, tucked in a sewing basket. "Made weeks ago," Duval announced over luncheon, holding it to the light. "Someone planned ahead." Accusations flew. "Rupert!" Major Vance barked. "You are always borrowing Adrian's things." "Absurd!" Rupert retorted, spilling his soup. "Why would I kill my partner?" Lydia's voice cut through, icy. "Perhaps because he was calling in your debts, brother dear." Miss Marple observed from her corner, needles flashing. She had taken to morning walks in the glassed conservatory, a long, humid room of potted ferns and lemon trees, its panes frosted opaque. There, amid the scent of damp earth, she found unexpected company. Miss Clara Beach, who arrived daily with a basket of mending, eager for an audience. It was on the third morning, as steam rose from their teacups, that Miss Beach leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Such a pretty village in summer, Miss Marple. Wildflowers everywhere, and the cowherds yodeling. But these winters, they bring out the worst. Did you know Mr. Kettering sacked the housekeeper last month? Frau Weber, a sour old thing with a limp. Caught her pilfering silver, he said, but I heard different." Miss Marple poured more tea, her expression attentive. "Indeed, my dear." Beach glanced at the door, lowering her voice. "She swore vengeance, said he'd rue the day. And there's more. She claimed he kept a secret ledger, hidden in the study. Wartime deals with German sympathizers. Frau Weber was from Basel, new people. After he dismissed her, she vanished into the village. But mark my words, grudges like that don't melt with the snow." Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. "Jealousy and money, Miss Beach. They twist people like bindweed on a rose bush. In my village, a dismissed gardener once poisoned the well out of spite. But wells can be tested." Beach tittered. "Your village sounds as wicked as this one. And the English here, always scheming. That Dr. Langton, mooning after Lydia like a lovesick calf. And Rupert, with his art dealings, more like fencing stolen icons, if you ask me." The conservatory door creaked, admitting Eleanor Harbottle with a tray of pastries. "Gossiping again, Clara. Aunt Jane, you mustn't encourage her." "Only observing, my dear. Miss Marple replied mildly. But as Beach chattered on about village flirtations, Miss Marple's mind wandered to a Danemid quarrel. The baker's wife, jilted and vengeful, who had spread rumours until the truth poisoned her own cup. That afternoon, tempers snapped in the drawing-room. Duval had assembled them to report on fingerprints. The poker bore only smudged traces, but the study desk yielded clear prints, Kettering's and one other, Dr. Langton's from a glass moved the previous week. "You visited him often, Doctor?" "Consultations," Langton said stiffly. "He complained of indigestion." "Or conscience?" Rupert sneered. "Enough." Lydia rose, her kimono swirling. "This inquisition serves no one." As she swept out, Mrs. Vance whispered to her husband, loud enough for all, so poised until "Adrian's money's mentioned." Duval quelled the murmurs, but the seed was sown. Evening brought the second discovery. With the light fading early, Henri lit the lamps in the study, now a cordoned-off sanctum. Duval, sifting the desk anew, pried open a false bottom in the central drawer. Inside lay a single letter, folded crisp. "Adrian, repay the 5,000 francs by month's end, or I expose your secret transactions to the authorities. The Zurich account will not shield you forever. PL, dated 3 days prior, the ink fresh and black." Duval held it aloft in the drawing-room, where the company gathered for cocoa. "Dr. Langton, your handwriting?" Langton stared, then blanched. "Forged! I wrote no such thing." "But the initials," Duval pressed, "and your prints on the desk." Lydia's eyes flicked to Langton, then away. Major Vance guffawed. "Caught in your own trap, eh?" Miss Marple, sipping her cocoa, noted the paper's edge, slightly curled, as if damp, and the phrasing too formal, unlike the doctor's terse speech. She recalled a forged note in Danemid, meant to incriminate the postman. The ink had betrayed it, bleeding on cheap stock. As the clock chimed 9, Duval dismissed them. "Tomorrow, when the snow eases, experts from Zurich. No one sleeps unguarded." The household dispersed uneasily. Miss Marple retired last, pausing in the hall to adjust a crooked picture, a lithograph of Alpine peaks. From above came a murmur of voices, low, urgent, from Lydia's room. She caught fragments. The letter, "must destroy." Then silence. In her bed that night, as the wind moaned anew, Miss Marple pondered. Whispers in the snow, like footsteps on fresh powder, clear at first, then trampled. Frau Weber's grudge, the wax key, the planted letter, false trails, perhaps, to mask the true path. Human nature loved its smokescreens. Outside, the flakes fell thicker, burying secrets deeper. But Miss Marple slept soundly, dreaming of bindweed and blooming roses. Chapter 5. The False Trail. On the fourth morning, a weak sun pierced the clouds, turning the snowfields into a glittering expanse. The roar of snowplows echoed up the valley. 3 massive machines from Zurich, their blades carving a path through the drifts. By noon, the road to Gorge-le-Châtel stood clear, and with it came Duval's reinforcements. A forensic team in fur-lined anoraks, a photographer with tripods, and a wiry sergeant clutching a briefcase of chemicals. The Villa Edelweiss buzzed with activity. Constables tramped mud across the hall tiles, and the air filled with the acrid tang of fingerprint powder. Inspector Duval gathered the household in the drawing-room at 2 o'clock, his manner triumphant. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows over faces drawn by confinement. "Progress, mes amis," he declared, holding up a small evidence bag. Inside gleamed a gold cufflink, engraved with swirling initials, RF, Gasps rippled through the room. Rupert Fortescue lurched forward, his tie askew. "What is that infernal thing?" "Found yesterday afternoon, under the body," Duval replied. "Missed in the first search. The rug's fringe concealed it. Your initials, Monsieur Fortescue, and traces of blood, type A, matching the victim." The room erupted. Major Vance sprang to his feet, slamming his fist on the mantel. "Caught red-handed! The bounder's been skulking about, owing Adrian a fortune. Planted the letter on Langton to throw us off." Mrs. Vance clutched her husband's arm, her eyes wide with vindication. "I knew it! All that bluster, hiding a killer's heart!" Lydia Fortescue sat statue still, her face a mask of porcelain, but her fingers twisted the emerald brooch at her throat. Dr. Langton leaned against the piano, a flicker of relief crossing his features before he schooled them neutral. Miss Beach tittered from her poof. "Oh, Rupert, always so clumsy with your jewellery." Eleanor Harbottle glanced at Miss Marple, whispering, "Aunt Jane, is it over?" Miss Marple, knitting by the window, where pale light filtered through melting icicles, merely pursed her lips. She examined the cufflink through the bag's transparency. Heavy, ornate, the gold dulled as if long worn. "Cufflinks are easily dropped, Inspector," she said softly, her voice cutting through the din. "And Mr. Fortescue has such large hands. Those initials might belong to his sister too. Lydia, my dear, do you wear links with your blouses?" Lydia's head snapped up, eyes flashing. "I do not, and Rupert's pair is in his room. Ask Henri." Duval raised a hand for silence. "We did. His dressing case holds the matching link. Clean, untouched. But this one—" He nodded to the sergeant who daubed it with reagent. Crimson bloomed on the cloth. "Fresh blood. Monsieur Fortescue, you will accompany me to Zurich for formal questioning." Rupert blustered, face purple. "Outrageous! A plant, a frame-up! Lydia, tell them!" She turned away, lips tight. "I cannot, Rupert. You are desperate." The constable seized his arms. He struggled briefly, spilling a vase of dried hydrangeas. "You'll regret this, Duval. I'll have your badge." As they marched him out to the waiting snowcat, the household buzzed like disturbed bees. Major Vance poured celebratory brandy. "Justice served! Adrian can rest easy." Mrs. Vance sobbed with relief, dabbing her eyes. Even Dr. Langton allowed a tight smile, murmuring to Lydia, "One less suspect." Lydia nodded absently, retreating to the stairs. Miss Beach cornered Eleanor. "Did you see his face? Guilty as Cain." But Miss Marple frowned, her needles idle for the first time. The cufflink's placement nagged. Too convenient, tucked precisely under the body's shoulder. And Rupert's hands, though large, lacked the strength for that poker blow. She recalled his feeble grip on a teacup yesterday. In Ganymede, a similar clue, a monogrammed handkerchief, had been dropped by the vicar's wife to shield her lover. False trails led to true hunters. That evening, with Rupert gone, an uneasy calm descended. Duval departed for Zurich, promising return by morning. Dinner was subdued, clear soup and cold meats, served by maids who whispered of the prisoner's curses. Miss Marple excused herself early, claiming fatigue, but once in her room, she lit a single candle and waited. The house creaked into silence. The wind had died, leaving only the drip of melting snow from the eaves. At 10:30, she slipped into the corridor, shawl over her nightgown, a sturdy hatpin palmed like a weapon. The study door stood sealed with police tape, but she knelt before it, examining the lock, a Yale, with a keyhole wide enough for tricks. From her pocket, she produced a twist of wire, pilfered from the conservatory that afternoon, and a dab of soft soap from her toiletries. In Danemead, she had once unlocked old Mrs. Hargreaves's dairy this way, proving the impossible burglary a hoax. Here the mechanism yielded after 3 careful probes, a soft click, and the bolt retracted. From inside it was child's play. Turn the key, withdraw it through the keyhole with thread. But from outside, she tested, the thread caught, the key immovable without force that would scar the escutcheon. No scars showed. Satisfied, she relocked it seamlessly and retreated to the shadows as footsteps approached. Light, hesitant. Dr. Langton, in his dressing gown, paused at the study door, glanced about, then pressed a key to the lock. It turned smoothly. He entered, emerging minutes later with a small ledger, which he tucked into his pocket before hastening away. Miss Marple smiled faintly in the dark. Keys multiplied like rabbits. She returned to bed, mind racing. The cufflink planted post-discovery, perhaps during the chaos of the scream. By whom? Someone with access, motive to shift blame. Next morning brought confirmation of her suspicions. A telephone call from Zurich shattered the fragile peace. Duval, voice terse over the crackling line. Rupert Fortescue released without charge. His cufflinks, both, lay pristine in his room, verified by Henri at the time of arrest. The bloody one was a duplicate, purchased that week from a village jeweller. The blood, animal, not human, smeared fresh to mimic type A. The inspector arrived by midday, snowcat churning slush. His triumph curdled to chagrin. The company assembled once more, faces a mosaic of shock and resentment. A frame, Duval admitted, tugging his beard. Clever. The killer, or an accomplice, retrieved it from the study wastebasket during yesterday's search. Major Vance swore. Then we're back to square one. Langton and his letter next. Langton paled but held firm. Lydia lit a cigarette with steady hands, exhaling smoke like a dragon. Miss Marple cleared her throat. Precisely, Inspector. Now who benefits most from Mr. Kettering's death? Not the framed man, but the one who planted the bait. Duval met her gaze, respect dawning. Madam Marple, you see further than I. Only what is there, my dear Inspector? Like weeds in a garden, one pulls and the roots show. As the afternoon waned, slush pooling in the drive, Miss Marple took tea alone in the conservatory. The ledger Langton carried, stolen evidence, pointed to deeper waters, forgery, perhaps, or lovers' pacts. Human nature, impatient, had overreached. The true trail glimmered, cold but clear. Chapter 6. The Village Parallel. The release of Rupert Fortescue cast a pall over the Villa Edelweiss deeper than any snowdrift. He returned at dusk in Duval's snowcat, sullen and unshaven, refusing dinner and barricading himself in his room with a bottle of Kirsch. The household, robbed of its scapegoat, turned inward. Major Vance took to solitary billiards, potting balls with vicious snaps. Mrs. Vance fluttered about the maids, demanding hot bricks for her feet. Miss Beach knitted feverishly, her needles a blur of spiteful clicks. Lydia Fortescue spent hours at the window, staring into the melting valleys as if willing escape, while Dr. Langton affected professional detachment, mixing tonics in the morning room. Inspector Duval, humbled but resolute, redoubled his efforts. That evening he interrogated the servants afresh in the kitchen, emerging with a stub of candle wax from Marta's apron pocket, consistent with the key impression. "Someone melted it here under our noses," he told Miss Marple privately, over coffee in the library. "But who? Miss Marple, seated by the lamp with her eternal shawl, smiled faintly. "Patience, Inspector. In my village of Denmead, there was old Mr. Hargreaves, found dead in his locked parlour, throat cut with his own razor. Everyone suspected the nephew who stood to inherit. The door bolted from inside, window nailed shut, a perfect enigma." Duval leaned forward, intrigued. "And the solution?" "The maid, Eliza, in love with the postman who coveted Hargreaves's savings. She entered while he napped, struck the blow, then used a string through the keyhole to lock it from outside, much as one might with a kitten's toy. The nephew's scarf planted nearby sealed his arrest. But Eliza confessed on the scaffold's eve. Jealousy, not money, drove her. The postman had eyes for the cook." Duval stroked his beard. "A woman's touch. Here, too, the poker aligned so neatly as if posed, and that scream theatrical, time to summon witnesses." "Precisely." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Observe, Inspector. The murderer knew Mr. Kettering's routine. Tea at 10, then the study for pipes and ledgers until midnight. Entry via a copied key, silent strike from behind, no struggle. The door locked after, key pocketed. But why the scream? To establish discovery, my dear, to weave the alibi of shock." Duval nodded slowly. "Someone who could scream convincingly, Mrs. Vance?" Miss Marple shook her head. "Too genuine in her hysterics. No, the one who benefits, yet lingers to watch." Her gaze drifted to the doorway, where Dr. Langton passed, carrying a tray of syringes. He had lingered since the arrest, citing professional duty, but Miss Marple noted his eyes, always following Lydia Fortescue, hungry as a winter wolf. That night, as the house slept, she heard them, murmurs from the conservatory, glass panes rattling softly. Next morning, the 5th since the murder, brought a thaw in earnest. Icicles wept from the eaves, and the valley rang with the drip of liberation. Duval's Zurich experts arrived by motor car, their van laden with gadgets. A vacuum for carpet fibres, a spectrometer for bloodstains. They confirmed the cufflinks fraud, pig's blood from the butchers, and dated the Langton letter to within hours of discovery. Ink solvent still volatile. Over breakfast, oatmeal and stewed plums, the company learned this in Duval's clipped bulletin. Rupert Fortescue, nursing a hangover, snarled, "Told you, now nab the doctor, his forgery's plain." Langton, buttering his roll with exaggerated calm, retorted, "Prove it. That letter's a crude fake. Look at the PL. The loop's wrong." Lydia interjected smoothly, "Enough bickering. Inspector, when may we leave?" Duval glanced at the window, where sunlight gilded the slush. "Tomorrow, perhaps. But first," a commotion interrupted. Henri bursting from the kitchen with a dustpan. In it lay a crumpled glove. Ladies, black kid leather, monogrammed LF, found behind the study fender during the night's cleaning. Lydia's cup clattered. "Mine! Impossible! I searched my room." Duval examined it. One pearl button missing, a faint rust-brown smear on the cuff. Blood? Or rust from the poker? Major Vance crowed. "The widow! With her brother's cufflink, family affair." Mrs. Vance nodded eagerly. "She slipped in, struck, screamed to cover." Miss Marple, sipping her tea, interposed gently. "Gloves are useful, Inspector, but easily discarded. And that button snagged deliberately?" In Danemed, a similar glove pointed to the squire's daughter, but belonged to the seamstress, paid to plant it. Duval pocketed the evidence. "We test it. Meanwhile, Doctor, your movements last night." Langton stiffened. "My room. Why?" "A constable saw you near the study at 2 a.m. "Insomnia. I checked the lock. Curiosity." Lydia's eyes met his, a flash of warning. Miss Marple excused herself after breakfast, retreating to the conservatory with a basket of wool. There, amid the stemming ferns, she pondered parallels. Hargreaves's maid had allies. The postman fetched the string. Here, lovers. Lydia's inheritance, half the estate, per the will Duval had read, and Langton's desperation. The ledger he stole, perhaps Kettering's proof of Langton's forgeries, supplying rich patients with opium derivatives. Blackmail ended by murder. At noon, shocking news arrived by telephone. The Zurich bank confirmed Kettering's account, swollen by wartime smuggling, but clean since '46. No secret transactions beyond legal trades. The Langton letter, useless. Duval gathered them in. The drawing room, face drawn. False trails multiply. Cufflink, glove, letter, all plants. The killer taunts us. Rupert laughed bitterly. Or protect someone. Lydia, you'd not. Silence, she hissed. Miss Marple spoke then, her voice carrying like a church bell. Inspector, may I suggest a test? The poker, wiped, you said, but check the handle's curve, where thumb rests. Prints smudge easily, but not all. Duval's eyes lit. The fire. Someone fetched a log that evening. Precisely. And the scream's owner. Voice untrained, but distinctive. As the expert worked in the study, Miss Marple observed Langton, sweat beading his brow, fingers twitching. Lydia lit a cigarette, hand unsteady. By tea, results. One clear print on the poker's curve. Dr. Peter Langton's from fetching embers at 10:30, witnessed by Henri. But the blade? Pristine, wiped after the blow. Duval slumped. A dead end. Not quite, Miss Marple murmured to Eleanor, who poured. In Danemead, the maid's ally betrayed her. A dropped earring. Here, impatient stirs. That evening, as stars pricked the clearing sky, Miss Marple slipped to the library. From her valise, she retrieved a small notebook, entries from the first day. Timings, glances, whispers. The parallel crystallized, not one killer, but two, bound by passion and greed. Lydia struck. Langton locked and screamed, his lighter voice disguised in panic. She closed the book. Tomorrow the unmasking. Human nature, like snow, melted under sun, but left tracks indelible. Outside, the thaw whispered of roads reopening. Inside, the trap tightened, sprung by village wisdom. Chapter 7. The Confession. The morning of the 6th day dawned crystalline, the Alps standing sharp and unclouded against a sky of polished sapphire. The thaw had worked its will. Roads gleamed black with wet asphalt, and a convoy of Zurich police vehicles churned up the drive, disgorging technicians with vacuum cleaners humming like angry bees. Inspector Duval, refreshed by a night's sleep in the city, assembled the household in the drawing room at precisely 11 o'clock. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, picking out motes of dust and the strained faces of the suspects. The fire was unlit. No one felt the chill more than the tension in the air. Duval stood by the mantel, notebook in hand, his constables flanking the doors. "This ends today," he announced. "The experts confirm. No fibres, no footprints in the snow, but traces remain. Ink analysis, glove chemistry. The killer grows careless." Murmurs rose. Major Vance, pipe clenched between teeth, growled approval. Mrs. Vance fanned herself vigorously. Rupert Fortescue slouched in an armchair, eyes bloodshot but alert. Lydia Fortescue sat erect on the sofa, her black suit impeccable. Dr. Langton beside her, too close, Miss Marple noted, their knees brushing. Miss Beach fidgeted with her reticule. Eleanor Harbottle poured tea from a silver service, her hands steady. Miss Marple occupied her usual chair by the window, shawl draped neatly, knitting basket at her feet. She had requested this gathering, and Duval, now her willing ally, had complied. "Madame Marple will speak," he said simply. "Listen well." All eyes turned. Miss Marple folded her hands, her voice gentle as summer rain but carrying to every corner. "Thank you, Inspector. I have imposed on you long enough with my village parallels, but one more will clarify. In Danemid, a locked room hid not one murderer, but two, lovers, each for separate gain, dividing the labour to perfect the illusion." A hush fell, broken only by the tick of the bracket clock. Here it was the same. Mr. Kettering's habits were known to all. Tea at 10 in the study, door left ajar for the servant. At 10:50, while the house settled, the killer entered silently with a copied key, wax impression from the kitchen, melted by candle that Marta will swear she never lit. Marta, hovering by the door, gasped. The blow was swift from behind as he bent over his desk. Poker fetched earlier that evening by Dr. Langton, under pretext of stirring the fire. Prints confirm it. The wound aligned perfectly, a woman's strength, guided by hate. Lydia's cigarette paused midway to her lips. Langton's jaw tightened. Then the staging. The door locked from inside with the original key, turned, then extracted through the keyhole on fine thread pocketed. The window untouched, but the scream, essential to summon witnesses and fix the time. A man's voice, pitched high in feigned terror, Dr. Langton's, muffled perhaps by a handkerchief. "Lies!" Langton surged to his feet. "Prove it!" Miss Marple regarded him mildly. "I shall, Doctor. The poker, wiped clean but not entirely. When Inspector Duval's men lifted it yesterday, a flake of black enamel chipped from the handle. Matches the cuff of your dressing gown, found this morning in the laundry hamper, hidden under sheets." Duval nodded to a constable, who produced the garment. A dark stain, irrefutable. And the letter in the desk, planted post-murder, during the chaos. Ink not dry, solvent fumes lingered till noon. Your handwriting, Doctor, but phrasing too stilted, copied from your old demand to Mr. Kettering. Why, to shift eyes from yourselves? Rupert Fortescue leaned forward. Themselves? Miss Marple nodded. Mrs. Fortescue killed for the inheritance, half the estate, as beneficiary, confirmed by the Zurich will. Mr. Kettering had confronted her weeks ago, forged cheques in her late husband's name, siphoning funds. He threatened exposure. Lydia laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Old woman, you prove nothing. Fantasy." "But I have, my dear." Miss Marple turned to Duval. "The glove, hers, with a missing button. Not blood, but rust from the poker, transferred when she gripped it. And the button, found in Dr. Langton's medical bag this morning during the search you permitted, Inspector. Snagged deliberately to plant later if needed." Langton, blanched, hand flying to his pocket. A constable stepped forward, retrieving the pearl orb. Lydia's poise shattered. "Peter, did you?" He rounded on her. "Me! You struck the blow! I only locked the door after thread from my fishing kit." The room exploded. Major Vance roared, "Lovers! The moonlit walks!" Mrs. Vance shrieked, collapsing in a faint. Miss Beach cried, "I knew it!" Rupert staggered up, face contorted. "You bitch! Framing me with that cufflink you bought!" Duval's men seized Langton, who twisted like an eel. Pressed against the wall, sweat streaming, he cracked first. "She planned it, all of it. The key copy, the wax, I made them in my surgery for her migraine visits." Kettering knew of my forgeries, supplying morphine to her friends in Zurich, splitting profits. He demanded half or exposure. Lydia said, "End it." I fetched the poker at 10:30, left it ready. She entered at 10:50, struck while I waited in the hall cupboard. Then I screamed, locked it, pocketed the key. The cufflink, she dropped it after during the discovery. Lydia sprang up, nails raking his cheek. "Liar! You begged me! Your practice ruined without his silence." Constables pulled her back, cuffing her wrists. She spat at Miss Marple. "Meddling crone! He deserved it! The miser! Hoarding while we starved!" Miss Marple sighed softly. "Greed starves the soul, Mrs. Fortescue. In Danemead, it hanged 2 others here. It merely imprisons." Duval signalled his men. "Take them." As they were led out, Lydia hissing defiance, Langton babbling pleas, the room deflated. Major Vance poured brandies all round. "By Jove, madame! Brilliant!" Eleanor embraced her aunt, tears glistening. Even Rupert, rubbing his wrists from his own ordeal, muttered, "Saved my neck." Miss Marple accepted a glass, sipping sparingly. "No brilliance, Major, only watching. Human nature betrays itself. Glances, whispers, overeager plants." Duval bowed. "I am in your debt, madame, without your parallels. A pleasure, Inspector. Villages teach one to see patterns." By afternoon, statements were taken, the villa a hive of officialdom. The lovers, transported to Zurich, would face trial. Premeditated murder, forgery, conspiracy. Kettering's ledgers, recovered from Langton's room, sealed their fate. As dusk painted the peaks violet, Miss Marple sat alone by the window, knitting resumed. The puzzle unravelled, threads neat, but human folly, that wove eternal. Chapter 8. The melting snow, the Villa Edelweiss, once a fortress against the storm, now stood open to the world. By mid-morning on the 7th day, the last police vehicles had rumbled down the drive, their tyres hissing on the wet gravel. Inspector Duval lingered only to shake hands in the hall, his beard flecked with meltwater from the eaves. "Madame Marple," he said with a formality that masked genuine warmth, "Zurich owes you a medal, or at least a lifetime supply of fondue." Miss Marple smiled, her bird-like frame straight in her woolen dress. "Quite unnecessary, Inspector. A cup of tea will suffice, and the knowledge that justice has been served." He chuckled, donning his cap. "You English and your understatement." "Au revoir, then. The roads are clear to Interlaken. Your train leaves at 3. With a final salute, he departed, leaving the household to exhale. The air in the drawing-room felt lighter, though shadows of the past week clung to the corners. A faint scorch mark on the mantel, where Duval had tested ash. A scuff on the parquet from constables' boots. Servants bustled with renewed vigour. Martha humming a Tyrolean tune as she polished silver. Henri sweeping the terrace with broad, contented strokes. The guests dispersed swiftly, eager to shed the villa's grim aura. Major Vance and his wife were first, piling valises into their hired Daimler by noon. "Splendid resolution, madame," the Major boomed, pumping Miss Marple's hand. "Reminds me of Simla 14, a regimental intrigue solved by the Colonel's Memsahib. You're wasted on knitting." Mrs. Vance, swathed in furs, pecked her cheek. "Such nerves we all had. Do visit us in Bournemouth. Sea air, not this dreadful snow." Miss Clara Beach followed, her trunk corded with string, chattering to the last. "The scandal will keep Gawler Chartel buzzing till Easter. Lydia and that doctor, moonlight and morphine. I'll write it all in my diary." She embraced Eleanor effusively. Then Miss Marple with a conspiratorial wink. "Your village tales, dear. Better than novels." Rupert Fortescue departed alone, his face gaunt but his step firmer, a cheque from the estate, Kettering's final generosity, creasing his pocket. He paused at the door, hat in hand. "I owe you, madam. That cufflink would have been my noose." His voice roughened. "Lydia was always the clever one, too clever." Miss Marple nodded kindly. "Cleverness without conscience twists back on itself, Mr. Fortescue. Travel safely." Dr. Langton's exit was unceremonial. Duval's men had collected him at dawn, bound for Zurich's cells. Lydia Fortescue, in handcuffs and a borrowed coat, had been trundled away the night before, her parting glare fixed on the Alps as if cursing their indifference. By 2:00, only Eleanor Harbottle and Miss Marple remained amid the echoing quiet. The drawing-room, restored to order, glowed in the afternoon sun. Rugs beaten clean, windows flung wide to admit the scent of pine sap and damp earth. Eleanor presided over a final tea on the terrace, porcelain cups, butter biscuits, and a view of the valley unfolding like a crumpled map. "Aunt Jane," Eleanor said, pouring amber Darjeeling, "a nasty business from start to finish. I invited you for rest, not riddles." Miss Marple accepted her cup, steam curling like a benediction. "Very nasty, my dear, but necessary. Mr. Kettering deserved better than to die a scapegoat for others' greed." Eleanor shivered, though the sun warmed her shoulders. Lydia seemed so composed, almost regal, and Peter, with his gentle manner, how did you see through it? Miss Marple buttered a biscuit with precision. "One watches, Eleanor. The glances that lingered too long, the whispers in shadowed halls, the overeager clues, dropped like breadcrumbs to mislead. In Danemead, I've seen it all before. A locked gate here, a forged note there. Villages are villages, whether in England or these mountains. People do not change. Jealousy festers, love sours into possession, and money whispers temptations no conscience can fully silence." Eleanor gazed down the slope, where chalets dotted the green like scattered toys. "Gore-le-Châtel will recover. The tourists come regardless. But we'll sell the villa, I think. Too many ghosts." "A wise choice." Miss Marple sipped her tea, eyes distant. "Ghosts fade with time, but memories instruct." Hongrie appeared with Miss Marple's valise, polished to a gleam, and her coat. The funicular station lay a short sledge ride away. Eleanor had arranged it. As they rose, arms linked, Miss Marple paused at the study door, now innocently ajar, poker restored to the fender. "Human folly fills such rooms," she murmured, "but truth sweeps them clean." The sledge bells jingled down the winding path, snowbanks shrinking to mud at the edges. At the station, Eleanor embraced her fiercely. "Right from Danemead, aunt, and no more murders." Miss Marple laughed softly. "One cannot promise, my dear, but I'll try." The train arrived on schedule, a crimson engine puffing steam into the crisp air. Miss Marple settled into her compartment, the window framing the receding peaks, white crowns melting to reveal rocky hearts. She unpacked her knitting, the grey shawl near complete, and the needles resumed their rhythmic click. In, out, twist, pull. As the line descended into gentler hills, Gore-le-Châtel faded, a cluster of chalets against the sky, smoke curling from chimneys like parting sighs. The murder, the storm, the unravelled lies. Another tapestry rewoven, threads of deceit plucked free. Miss Marple leaned back, eyes half closed, human nature eternal as the mountains, beautiful from afar, treacherous up close. But patterns emerged always for those who watched. The train whistle sounded, carrying her homeward. Jane Mead waited, with its roses and its quiet scandals. Life, after all, was the greatest puzzle and the most satisfying to solve.